I'd like to hand it over to Brant and Patrick. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you very much. So, anybody here heard of lean startups or customer development? How about the buzzword pivot? Anybody been reading about the word pivot? I actually throw that one out there because almost everybody has been aware of the buzzword pivot. But in this group, that's great though. I love to talk to people that haven't heard of this stuff before. So Patrick and I are super passionate about lean startups and customer development. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk to you a little bit about why we're passionate about it, what are lean startups, and then how that might affect the way you do market assessments. Do you have anything to add?
Sure. And real quick, who here is actively doing a startup? Anyone? One person here? 3, 4, maybe 5? Got it. The rest of you, maybe you can tell me a little bit about sort of your backgrounds or what you guys are working on.
I'm the sales and marketing director for a small company.
Okay, got it. Zed?
I'm working with him as an independent sales rep, always looking for ways to tune up my process.
Okay, got it. Anyone back there, sir? I'm going to pick on you.
I'm Has Patel. I'm an independent consultant and also teach at UCI Extension.
Great. And the gentleman behind you?
Chris Para. I'm a product developer with a business background.
Beautiful. Okay, I love it. Product development guys too. Okay, good. So there, should we just jump right into it?
Yeah. So the startup ecosystem, startup environment's changing drastically, right? So the amount of money it takes to develop a product now is extremely low. So you have social media marketing that means that reaching a broader audience costs a lot less money. So primarily if you're working in software, internet, wireless, hardware solutions for the IT as well. There's some markets, obviously clean tech and some life sciences where it's still expensive to build product, but even with those, the price of building a startup company is drastically lower than it was even 5-10 years ago. There's a ton of money out there for investment, and it's not just in the venture capitalists anymore. You have incubators, accelerators that are willing to start with very small investments to get people going. There's a lot of angels now in the micro VCs you've maybe heard about, super angels. And so there's money flowing to startups really like never before. This is also a global phenomenon, so it's not just the US that there's these entrepreneurs coming out of the woodworks in order to build new products. It's happening in every country. Patrick and I hopefully have an opportunity to travel to Central South America this summer, traveling to Canada. People that we see tweeting about lean startups and customer development are literally all over the world, so it's pretty exciting that way. Entrepreneurship is very social now, so it's not only in terms of your marketing, but it's also going to meetups. It's also the resources that are online. So the amount of mentoring that goes on, the collaboration between entrepreneurs is like it never was before. I used to go to networking meetings, 20 years ago, and then it was really sort of all about me. I wanted to tell you about me and give you my business card. And today, a lot of these meetups are completely flipped. It's like, tell me about you, how can I give you value? And it's really it's a great collaborative environment. And what it means is that today's entrepreneurs have a lot of peer support as well as a lot of mentoring. Even classes like this, right? So what that makes is today's entrepreneurs a lot more savvy than entrepreneurs have been in the past. So they're not more intelligent, but they're actually coming to the game with a lot more knowledge, with a lot more help, a lot more understanding the ups and downs, the roller coaster ride of being an entrepreneur. So it really is sort of this new environment. And what we're seeing is that there's now hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs. It amazes me how many people are coming up with ideas and actually able to go launch their product because it doesn't cost that much. People graduate from college, people are actually in college assuming that they're going to be an entrepreneur, that they're not going to go work for a business for 10, 20 years and then become an entrepreneur straight out of college. So Patrick and I just both participate in these lean machine Lean Startup Machine weekends. Has anybody heard of a startup weekend? So a startup weekend is when you get usually a bunch of engineers together in a room for a weekend voluntarily. This is what they're doing on their weekends, and they build products over the weekend. And sort of the traditional method is you sit around and you build products that nobody cares about, right? Well, the lean startup approach to that is you actually take that same team of engineers and they get out of the building. They do that in order to learn whether the products that they're going to build over the weekend, whether anybody might want them. Why I bring this up now, though, is that what's amazing to me is to see the number of quality ideas that are pitched at these startup weekends. You get 50, 60 people in a room, half of them stand up and pitch their ideas, and they're not all rock star ideas, they're not all great ideas, but this is being repeated over and over again all over the world. So to me, it's just this phenomena of entrepreneurs. So because the costs have changed, because there's all of this money, the power in the relationship with investors versus founders is now shifting to the founder side. So it's no longer that you're going to have to stand in line to go meet a VC on the VC's grounds. You get to start building your product and prove your business model with low amounts of money, perhaps seed funding, and then the venture capitalists are going to come to you. My personal belief is that this is driving, VCs are going to need to change their model so that they're no longer just going for the big win, which is kind of their traditional strategy. They're going to invest in a bunch of companies, hoping one of them is going to be, a $100 million company, and then they get the returns they want. So a lot of the VCs that we're seeing, the micro VCs, are really looking for the smaller wins too, which it means the mergers and acquisitions that get founders a life-changing experience. They sell their company for $15, $20, $50 million. That's a life-changing occurrence. So again, in my belief, if these startups are building their businesses in the new way, in this new startup methodology, then there's this potential for our economy to develop what I call an innovation machine. And so it's my belief that we're shifting away from services. Services are being outsourced now, so what is our comparative advantage going to be as an economy? And it is going to be our entrepreneurship. It is going to be entrepreneurs that are increasing productivity of individuals and businesses through the new products that they build. And so what we're having now with hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs, each targeting a market, carving out a niche and building products that are suited for that niche, I really believe we're creating this innovation machine. And I think that the methodology to do it is through lean startups, and we're going to say why.
Real quickly, I just want to make clear that how we're positioned this is radically different than what happened in the Silicon Valley, the dot-com boom 10 years ago, 11 years ago now, right? Where it was all about the $100 million exit, cost you $5 million in 6 months and 10 guys to build what would now take you one guy and some out of the box software essentially. So it's a radically, in 10 years I think we've had just orders of magnitude change in terms of how to build scalable startups, in terms of the knowledge needed, the knowledge transfer, low cost has again orders of magnitude differences.
So there's three popular philosophies that get a lot of play on Twitter and the blogosphere, and this is the way I summarize them. The first one is be like Steve. So instead of the be like Mike, they used to say the ad campaign for Michael Jordan, and to me the analogy was a high school counselor actually goes and talks to these young student athletes and says, yeah, really what you should do for your career is go be like Michael Jordan, right? So now we have investors out there and they're holding on to their dream of the $100 million win or whatever, and they're saying, oh, all you got to do is go be like Steve Jobs, okay? So that's strategy number one, be like Steve. Strategy number two is almost the opposite. It's the just do it faction, right? And so the just do it faction, my sports analogy for that is everybody could be an Olympic athlete if you just try hard enough, right? So it's all about execution. So in the startup world, what that means is all of you can be, billionaires, and if you're not, it's just because you're not working hard enough. Okay. The third philosophy out there is the lean startup methodology, and so what is it about lean startups? Why lean startups? So here's the two big ideas around lean startups. The first is that a vast majority of startups fail not because they can't build a product, it's because they have no market. So if you think about that for a second, the technology is advanced enough now that most companies, most products that you want to build are pretty darn easy to build. You can build internet products, you can build software, you can build wireless iPhone apps. There's not technology risk. Where there is risk is in the market. Do people care about what you're building?
So just, again, this is actually deceptively simple. So we often say this, or I'll often reference this, and then people go, their eyes sort of glaze over, and they go, "Oh yeah, of course." Well, it's not of course. If this is true, then we wouldn't have had the .com boom again 10, 11 years ago. Okay. So the person that advanced this idea is a guy named Steve Blank. He wrote a book called The 4 Steps to the Epiphany. If you're doing any sort of product development or startups, you should go out and read that book today. It's called The 4 Steps to the Epiphany by Steve Blank. And this is a big idea. Again, deceptively simple, massive idea, and really has huge now sort of seismic effects, ripple effects in the startup world. Also, a guy named Clayton. Oh, there we go, Clayton Christensen.
Right.
Very similar.
So the second idea you want to keep in mind is that your business model, you're building a startup, it's very likely that some major aspect, probably more than one aspect of your business model, is going to change at some point. So most of the products that we know and love didn't start out the way we know them, right? So does anybody know how YouTube started? They started out as a dating site. PayPal started out as microprocessors on the Palm Pilot. You have any favorites, Patrick?
Flickr was, I think, Flickr originally was like a chat application in a game. Who else? And there's also, you can take stuff offline. For example, Wipro, the Indian IT services firm, multi-billion-dollar firm, started out as a vegetable oil processing plant. Right now they're multi-billion dollars. The point is that due to market conditions, right, companies and startups have to evolve.
Well, even when Christensen wrote this in the early 90s, he referenced Intel, which started out in DRAM before they were into microprocessors, and Honda actually made their foray into the United States by essentially inventing off-road motorcycles, when what they were trying to do was compete against BMW and Harley Davidson for street bikes.
And I think Facebook is the same story, right? They started out as like a dating site, and how were those guys?
Right. Yeah. Just really the more you learn about these companies is they end up, and this is why. Do I have this slide coming up? It's the why pivot is such a big buzzword out in our world now, is because everybody's talking about, oh, you got to pivot, and of course you don't want to overdo this, but it really is now sort of this internet meme is all about pivoting.
There's also sort of a conspiracy, which is sort of a strong word, but there's a conspiracy when you see a successful startup that made it big. The marketing people, the PR folks go back and rewrite history. They're like, oh, YouTube is huge and massive now, and this was what it was going to be from the very, very first day we started YouTube, right? And I'm not trying to pick on YouTube, I think it's a great company, or any startup. You see it, once the success has been achieved, everyone goes back and rewrites history and makes it look like it was, preordained. And then,
and also then says that's the roadmap for the future, right? So you invent a story of the past and you project it forward, and that's your roadmap, right?
So Brent, when you use the word pivot, are you saying that when you start a startup, you pivot on something, but then you expand into a much broader scope? Is that the context here, or I'm not getting this?
Okay, well, yeah, I'm introducing it a little bit early. We talk about it a little bit more in a couple slides. So when we get to that, follow up with your question if I don't answer it. Okay. So here's the basic tenets of the lean startup then, right? So you don't really know what the problem is or the solution. You have good guesses as to what they are. Your business model is going to change. So what you have to do is go through those changes fast enough until you find what works, and you have to do that before you run out of money. So that's what the concept of the lean startup is.
So real quick, actually, Brant, real quick. So what I like about these big ideas here, and I really think they are big ideas, is that this was always a fundamental truth in sort of the chaos of startup land, but the changes that people went through are always sort of driven by panic and fear. Like, oh, we tried to do pet food, online pet food delivery. Oh, it's really not working. What are we going to do next, right? The pivot, or whatever you want to call it, pivot or iteration, was going to happen at some point because we have incomplete information about what the market wants and how we deliver that, et cetera, et cetera. It was going to happen anyway. This is actually embracing, in my mind, sort of the reality of how startups actually work.
So, maybe an overly complicated slide, but this is real quickly. Basically, lean startups are about combining what's called agile development with customer development. Agile development is an engineering term for developing small amounts of code, small amounts of features in a very short time, and getting that out in front of the customers to validate that it works and that people want it, combined with customer development, which is a similar principle to test your marketing. And it's an integrated approach, since your people out speaking to customers can bring that back into the engineers. The engineers can build it, so then you actually have product in front of customers, and that's testing it, and your solution team then, or your problem team that's out there figuring out whether they've got the right idea nailed with their customers, takes that product out, so it's a continuous loop on both the market development side simultaneously with the product development side.
Again, I keep wanting to juxtapose this sort of I don't want to be a straw man, but previous, right? People often build stuff 6 months in a cave, coding an app.
No, not even 6 months,
Right.
but 2 or 3 years.
And
right?
then presenting to a customer, like, oh, what do you think? And then wondering why they didn't get traction.
Right. So the old style, still being taught in a lot of places. You write a 40-page business plan, put in your requisite hockey stick revenues, right? Then you go and you present that to your investors, and if you get somebody that will actually invest on you, you've essentially signed a contract that you're going to deliver these revenue targets that you pulled out of the air, right? So then you got your investment money based on this hockey stick, and then you spend a year, 2 years building the product. Towards the end of that process, you start hiring your sales and marketing people, and you do this big launch, right? Big marketing launch, get the product out there. You maybe make a couple of opportunistic sales. You sell to the brother-in-law of one of your board of directors, and you have this little bit of success, and maybe you hit those really super low first quarter targets, and then suddenly you start seeing in the second quarter, it's flatlining. In today's web world, we call this the TechCrunch bump, right? You get your product out on TechCrunch, and you get tens of thousands of visitors. And then as the months go, not only does the number of visitors dip, but the number of people that you originally got are no longer using your web service, so your retention is really low. So what Lean Startups tries to do is let's flip that. Instead of before you're doing your big launch, before you spend 2 or 3 years and all of this money building product that you don't know whether people want, but you integrate that approach. You integrate the market and the customer development with your product development. So Patrick and I like to say, this is not, if you can just get these philosophical principles in terms of lean startups and customer development, you're good to go. We're not advocating a step-by-step approach or a very rigid methodology. So basically, the philosophy here is question your own assumptions, right? So everything that you think you know about your startup are actually guesses. So you want to say what you think you know as forcefully as you can, because you believe in yourself and all the rest. I agree with that. Believe in yourself, but be skeptical of your ideas.
And then this is a big idea. This is Steve Blank, again, the author of the 4 Steps of Epiphany. It's called Get Out of the Building, right? What he means to say is, I have a great idea I want to sell cupcakes, right? And I'm going to have these cool cupcakes. They're going to be jalapeno pumpkin flavored cupcakes. They're going to be amazing, right? Instead of me building the factory to build my jalapeno pumpkin cupcakes, why don't I go out and try to sell a few to Brant?
You've been watching like the Cupcake Wars, haven't you?
It's actually, I hate cupcakes. That's why I keep using it. And so the point is this: why not try to do some validation, right, before I actually do scale? Again, it sounds deceptively simple. If it were that simple, or if we had understood this 10 years ago, billions of dollars wouldn't have been wasted, right? So you guys maybe remember Webvan from the dot-com boom, right? They scaled to build home delivery, online ordering for groceries, and they actually didn't validate the idea because they didn't want to, at that time, want to order groceries online, right? So get out of the building and actually validate these ideas. And the last sort of step is iterate on these ideas, right? So don't do it just once, right? I go to Brant, I try to sell him some cupcakes. He goes, you know what? I don't like orange flavored ones. I like cherry flavored ones, and I'll pay twice as much for those because I can sell them to my,
I
kids.
firmly believe that fruit and dessert should not be mixed. So I'm just still
The point is that you want to iterate through these, you want to iterate and cycle through these things, right? And this is actually interesting. This getting out of the building, again, this is Steve Blank's shorthand phrase for, get out to your client's site and figure out their reality. There's other sort of acronyms that say the same things. Nothing interesting happens in the office. I've heard that before. People have thrown that around. And then in the lean manufacturing philosophy, there's actually a Japanese expression that means essentially the same thing. Get out and see what's happening in the real world.
So, what does this mean in terms of market assessments? So, traditionally, there's talked about a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach. So, we'll talk about this real quickly. To me, the first thing that you want to ask yourself is what is the objective that you're trying to do with your market assessment? Is it because you're putting together one of these 40-page business plans and you need to come up with your hockey stick? Are you trying to raise money so you need to convince an investor about how much money you're going to make? I would say that the first reason why you should be doing a market assessment is to figure out whether you actually want to build your startup. And you should think about it in terms of, if in the end nobody wants my product, how bummed am I going to be that I spent 6 months, a year building the company, right? So the cupcakes top-down approach.
Right. So this is pretty typical. If you guys have ever seen a pitch deck, right? Big, massive number, $9 billion for cupcakes, or for online food ordering, or for online dog food ordering, whatever it is, right? It's pretty typical. Again, I'm sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Caricaturizing. Anyway, pretty typical. Usually, Gartner or Forrester or one of these big research firms, right? You quote them. You see it all the time. You can buy reports, right, where the Gartner guys went out, did a bunch of research, then you can quote them. Feels pretty good. I tend to be pretty skeptical about this. I think they give you a good sort of ballpark figure if it's a massive market or small, but how do those guys arrive to that? Those conclusions
Right.
may not be suitable for your startup.
So, these numbers can be useful when you're demonstrating you have a big vision, and it's a big vision inside of a big market, right? So, if you're trying to raise money, investors will want to see, what is sort of the dollar figure that represents, the great wide world that you're actually trying to tackle. But it's also a dangerous number, right? So it can be very self-delusional. The number of decks that I've seen where they've had, sort of a massive number up there, I'm not sure it's quite as much as a bazillion, but, and then they'll say, well, conservatively, we estimate that we're going to tackle 1% of that market, right? So 1% is a conservative number, but 1% of a bazillion, that's actually still a pretty big number. So it's pretty easy to get into a game of self-delusion there, and you actually haven't demonstrated that anything about being able to tackle that market. So while I'm not going to say never do this. I am going to say that you need to use that number wisely, and I don't think that there's an investor out there that hasn't seen deck after deck that has been told about their several billion-dollar market. So be wary of the top-down approach. So then there's the bottoms-up approach.
Yeah. So this is bottoms up. So this is clearly how you back into another equally large number, hopefully, right? So here I chose red velvet coconut jalapeno cupcakes. They're $42 a pop. in my little market, I think I can address in 1 year, there's 1 million people are gonna buy, and I think they're gonna buy 14 times a year, right? X, Y times Z, right? We get massive market, right? It's really pretty simple. You can, again, this is a very simple example. You can do this much more sophisticated depending on what you're selling, what your product is. I intentionally chose cupcakes to keep it simple. I don't want to, you know, if you're running a freemium business and you're going to be, you know, disrupting, you know, Salesforce.com, you know, CRM stuff, it's going to be a different sort of model, but essentially the model's the same. I took this from Dave McClure's Startup Viagra, How to Pitch a VC, by the way. So if you are interested in, you know, building a pitch deck for a VC, go see Dave's stuff, right? So there's a little, you can either Google Startup Viagra, How to Pitch a VC, or just take that short URL right there. Not, you know, not very sophisticated, it's not very complicated. I don't think there's, you know, we could all do simple multiplication here and division.
So the advantage to an approach like this is that it actually exposes all of your assumptions, right? So your assumption on how much money you're going to make, you know, per cupcake or per dozen, $42 for one.
Yeah.
It's
Wow.
pretty
That's
hot
Newport
cup.
Beach prices.
Yeah. So an assumption would be it's the price. There's actually maybe even a line in between here, which is, you know, what is your reach, you know, based on your marketing, how many eyeballs are going to even get on your offer, and then there's a conversion number there, right? How many people are actually going to buy out of those numbers? So you end up exposing a bunch of assumptions, and the reason why investors like that is because they're going to take all of your assumptions and they're going to, you know, slash them by, you know, 50 to 90% and try to figure out if there's actually any valid business in there, right? It's sort of like they're going to look at it best case scenario by maybe using your numbers, and then worst case scenario by slashing them by 90% and trying to figure out, you know, how bad off you are at that point. We definitely support the bottom-up approach, and not only because it exposes the assumptions, but it actually gives you an idea of what you need to be working on, right? So you can actually start segmenting your market if you're thinking about it from a bottoms-up approach, and basically keep in mind that if you're going to get an investment or you're going to build a business, you're going to have to do this sort of financial modeling anyway. You're going to have to understand who are your customers, who are going to be your early adopters, the people that are the first ones that want to try out, you know, radical jalapeno-based cupcakes, and how, you know, you're going to be able to estimate what's the cost to reach them. You know, maybe there's specific blogs for jalapeno lovers, you know, and so you can start estimating how much money it's going to cost for you to reach those people. So it really is it's a financially based, bottoms-up approach to figuring out what's the reasonable amount of money it's going to spend to get to those people. So then what you really want to get to is to the point that you've got here's what your cost of acquisition is, and here, once they become addicted to these cupcakes, this is my lifetime value. They're going to continue to buy, and now you have the basics of your business model, your guest business model, and that's what the investor wants to see. But like I said before, it gives you things to test, right? You can start testing those market segments. So we're saying do customer development to validate the segments and your other assumptions. And the customer development is you actually go out and you talk to these people, right? You can do surveys, you can do landing pages online where you're measuring clicks through on AdWords, and this is all just for testing, right? And there's a bunch of online tools that you can use, askyourtargetmarket.com, bunch of ways available online now for you to start interacting with your customers, but all of those, in my mind, need to be corroborated with individual interviews, with speaking to people to see whether there's anybody passionate about this solution that you're bringing into the market. And it also helps you divide those segments, right? What is the profile or the demographic of this person? What does their social market look like? Who do they talk to? Who influences them? That's what you kind of want to learn about your different segments. So your numbers are just guesses until you validate your business model. Your market assessment is more accurate with the more that you validate. And guess what? most investments these days do not come before proof. So if you've got if you've got several startups underneath your belt, you've had a couple of exits, then you'll probably be able to get some money based on a good idea if you've got the pitch together and the investors do believe it's a good idea. But if you're a first-time entrepreneur, you're just not going to get money based on an idea anymore. You have to start building your product. You have to start proving your market. You have to start proving part of your business model.
Any questions, by the way? We're kind of going fast.
The question is this, if you go back to the roots, entrepreneurs are like, some of them I know are like software engineers, or they create this mousetrap. But at least they know is the market side. They always complain they don't know how to sell, they don't know how to size the market. And then you throw in, they say, hey, you know what? You got to do this bottom-up thing, and it has to be a rigorous model, so you can check your assumptions, etc. So that's where the disconnect is.
Well, it's one of the reasons why we love that lean machine weekend that we were talking about, because we get teams of engineers that were hoping they were going to stay inside the building hacking on products all day, and we make them get out and go talk to customers. So it really is, it's one of those things that, there's, engineers will spend a lot of time trying to figure out and actually invent tools so that they don't actually ever have to talk to a customer, right? So all of those tools that I was telling you about, usabilitytesting.com, right? Oh yeah, and just go to there, and they're actually going to take care of all that customer stuff for me, and I'll be good to go, right? So it's a hurdle to overcome. The fact is that engineers can now do a lot of really good marketing without ever talking to a customer. They can, so it doesn't have to be this, fluffy Madison Avenue marketing that engineers aren't drawn to. It actually can be process oriented. It's similar to using a scientific process, so that actually appeals to a lot of these engineers. If you give up that side of the business, if you give up the sales and marketing side and you go and hire sort of an old school traditional sales and marketing, you're going to be spending a lot of money without seeing results. So maybe some of those engineers have to suffer that pain before they go, well, next time I'm going to do it a little bit differently.
This is embracing the reality that we've all heard. We've all heard, the phrase like, build a better mousetrap and the world will be the path to your door, right? This is embracing the reality that that's actually bullshit, right? For the most part, right? And engineers we like solving problems. Often people solve problems, provide solutions for problems that don't exist. This is what we're getting at. So let me give you another example. So Segway, you guys remember Segway when that first was going to come out? Right? It was going to change the shape of cities and urban landscapes. No one ever bothered to check if people wanted to spend $3,000 for this kind of dorky looking scooter thing, right? And 5,000 at the time, right? No one ever checked. Now they've pivoted actually into like the security, the mall cop sort of the touristy business. But my understanding at the time was aimed at Square, at the everyday consumer, and it was going to replace the car. That was right. That was the hype around it. That was the PR and hype around it. That's how they were positioning it. Guess what? People don't want to drop $5,000 for that. Maybe there's a few people that do. The point is that the technology was awesome, right? Remember at the time it was like amazing. You stepped on it, bounced perfectly, like mind-blowing technology. It doesn't matter. Is what I'm getting at. You got to get out of the building and test these assumptions. You can have the best mousetrap ever if it's not really solving
So the
problems.
message is the engineer or entrepreneur has to just get out and do, because I agree with Brent, right?
Yes.
That the hiring an old school, sales guy and pay him $200,000 and bonuses, etc., have not worked. At least the guys I work with.
But you hire them once you figured out,
Right.
once you validated a lot of stuff, right? So once you go, okay, I know exactly what I'm selling, I know how to reach my customers, I know how much it costs to acquire them, I know the messaging they respond to, I know their substitutes. Then you go hire that silver-tongued, 6'5", sales guy who's great on the golf course, and he just goes and executes. That's when you hire that guy.
And there are actually, like in the B2B world, you can hire what we call the Renaissance sales guy, and that's a sales guy that actually does understand how to go out and learn the market. So you know, it's not like to throw all sales and marketing people under the bus. I've been a marketing person, you know, for a long time, and I guess it's the differentiation between, number one, old school versus new school. You don't want, the old school just grabs, you know, from their toolkit and goes and executes on the X, Y, and Z that they've always done before. And that's sort of a dangerous way to go if nobody has actually figured out what the right methods are. And you can spend a lot of money and burn through all your resources by doing that. So there are salespeople, there are marketing people that you can hire that will help you to figure out what that roadmap should be, what the sales and marketing roadmap should be. And then you turn that over to your turnkey marketers and your turnkey salespeople. Now, it doesn't get away from the need, though, for the founders who hold the core assumptions of their business, that they're the ones that need to go and talk to the customers to validate what those core assumptions are. Is there really a problem that they're trying to solve? Is there the solution that you have in your mind going to solve that problem? Or is it going to likely solve that problem? Or does it sound appealing to the customer who supposedly has that problem? There's really no way around understanding, honing in on the market signal, right? Understanding that pain. So in one of these Lean Machine events that we did in San Francisco a couple weeks ago, a team was building like a photo sharing service, right? And we're all like, oh, another photo sharing. I mean, we need another photo sharing service. And what they wanted to do was actually they were going to use some, I guess, face recognition technology or look at past photos that these people had shared and figure out what are the good photos, right? So what are the high quality photos of a family? And they thought, or whatever pictures that you're taking, and they thought that the pros might like this market because they're taking, you know, thousands and thousands of pictures. So could you actually develop a technology that will pick the good pictures out of that lot? The pros hated the idea. They actually loved the process of going through and selecting those photographs. What they found, though, were moms were eager for that. They felt like, socially, they felt like bad moms if they could not produce quality pictures of their kids. And so one of the guys that was presenting this idea at the end when we were doing the finals was saying when he felt the emotion from this woman talking about how involved they needed to be in choosing the pictures, and that she could have help with that, and that she could have these, you know, great photographs, that it was really important to her, and she was emotional to this guy when they were talking, and that was the point where this customer development, he had you know, sort of dove in deep enough to understand the emotional connection. That's the pain that you're trying to uncover, right? In the B2B world, it's usually money driven. You know, can you increase my ROI? Can you know, expand my market segments? A lot of these things are very measurable, but in the B2C world, it's often an emotional thing that you're trying to connect with. And that's what you're trying to do with customer development, is trying to dig in deep enough to understand that need or that pain or that passion actually exists.
And also, real quick, riffing on what Brant just said about, I want to go take a step back about sales and marketing, right? There's a time in this customer development model, which the Kool-Aid that Brant and I obviously drink from, there's a time for learning, where the founders are learning, there's time for executing. And so I actually have a friend up in LA, he's at a pretty prominent, well-funded startup, and I spoke to him a few weeks ago, and I said, oh, how are sales going? He goes, oh, our sales guy is awesome. We just closed like 10 deals, high fives all around, you know, rock and roll, you know, cash is coming in. A week later, I talked to him, like, oh, how's that going? He goes, you know, I just figured something out. We're still at this learning phase. Those 10 deals we closed, they're all different customers, meaning different types of customers. They're all for different amounts, and we're all doing something slightly different. We actually don't have anything scalable or repeatable. And the sales guy was just doing what the sales guy's paid to do. Go execute, close these guys, and the guy's a great salesperson, right? So the sales guy, my friend, and the CEO had to have a meeting and say, hey, sales guy, we gotta put you on a leash because we don't know what you're selling, right? I mean, this guy's just closing deals, but what they're actually searching for is a repeatable, scalable model. You see what I'm saying? And so this is not against sales or marketing. There's a time for execution, there's a time for learning. And so it's, you know, context dependent. And I think that's a nuance a lot of people miss about customer development.
And that happens all the time.
Absolutely.
A sales guy goes in front of CEO says, can you do this? Sure, we can do it.
Right.
And now it's a big headache for the software guys to change whatever that industry wants to run.
So how do you find that sweet spot between, the soft launch, the beta site testing, gathering feedback, fine tuning it, to locking it down, doing the formal launch, scaling up?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's like one of the most difficult ones to answer, right? So,
I was afraid you'd say that.
yeah, go ahead. You have
So I was
something?
gonna say, so I'm gonna give you an irritatingly philosophical answer about this, which I know you're looking for actionable stuff, and like I wish I had like the exact, I could get right in your brain and know exactly, what the answer is, assuming I know it, which I don't. There's this concept called product market fit. I don't know if everyone's heard of this concept. It's when you found, the solution that nails, the problem. You know the price that people are responding to. You know the messaging. You know how much it costs to acquire a customer. Theoretically, the long-term value of that is higher. That's when you go, okay, now let's go get some money. And now we actually we built a machine where you put in $1 and it spits out 3. That's when you scale, theoretically. Again, this is sort of philosophical sort of understanding of this, and this is kind of what people talk about. This is actually popularized by Mark Andreessen. I don't know if you get pretty famous entrepreneur in the Silicon Valley. He actually wrote a blog post about this a few years ago and sort of explored these ideas.
So, it's nebulous, right? The way I sort of describe it is, you're there when you wake up and you have a whole new set of problems. So before you're there, your problems are, where are my leads coming from? How can I optimize my conversion funnel? We're not reaching it. We're not acquiring enough people to our website. How do I build that? How do I convert them? Now they're in our system. They're not retaining my sales. I sold 10, but to 10 different people. And then when you've reached it, suddenly your set of problems are, I can't fix bugs fast enough. I don't have enough customer support.
Right.
My servers are crashing. So it really is. It's when your customer is now leading you instead of you're leading your customer.
When the demand overwhelms the capacity.
Yeah.
And there's different sort of analogs as well. So it
And
depends.
that's what you call product market fit or product market misfit.
No, that's product market fit. If it's a misfit, then you don't even have anybody
Let me
knocking
give you an
on the
example.
door.
Those are the right kind of problems
So
to
let me
have.
give you, these are great problems. These are problems that you can all solve with money, right? This is the problem you and
Also,
VC.
these are the right kind of problems.
Right. This is where you go, hey, I need more, server capacity. It's going to cost me $10 million a year. The reason why is because money's flowing into my pocket. Can I get, good terms? These are great problems to have.
Right. I mean, like
Money solves these problems.
You're on a shared server before, you're on a dedicated server, right? And you have this
Gotcha.
this painful point where your stuff is crashing and all the rest, and you have to go off and do other things.
But alternatively, to follow on his comment, not to pivot too soon in the valley of death.
Well, it's true. That's again, it's one of the things that we actually talk about that. We'll just hop around to some of these slides. Is that there's nothing deterministic about lean startups in this methodology, right? It's not a paint by numbers approach, and so this doesn't take away anything from the art of entrepreneurship. And the question of when do you keep busting down that door because you really think that there's something there, or no, it's time to pivot. I mean, that's a founder's decision, right? There's no methodology for making that decision. And you asked about pivot earlier. So the concept of pivot really is your business model. You have several aspects of your business model. You're trying it out. Something doesn't work, but you have learned some things. So you keep one foot planted down in what you've learned, and then you're pivoting the other aspects of your business model. And maybe you pivot multiple times, and the second pivot is you're leaving where you first had your foot down. So. And that's different in my mind than iterating. Iterating is when you're actually testing a particular idea. It could be messaging, positioning, landing pages, product features. So, and those are just are sort of smaller changes that you're making to try to figure out what's the right thing and what works versus a business model change is really where the pivot comes in.
Really quickly, also anecdotal story about product market fit. You also see sort of the negative. So when Twitter goes down, right? When Twitter goes out, people go nuts, right? Like people complain about the blog stream blows up. Like Twitter goes down, it's a big deal. A friend of mine, he's got a startup. His site went down. He didn't know about it for 8 hours. Not one of his customers. No one complained about it, right? pretty clear, he's nowhere near product market fit, right? And we joked about this. He's like, yeah, like there's no pain, right? Another friend of mine, different guy, their site went down for like 5 minutes. They had the CEOs of 5 of their customers call up their CEO within seconds, right? So it kind of gives you some ways to triangulate around sort of this nebulous concept.
In terms of actual methodology and process, I have several clients that are sort of mired in that area. It's really where most startups probably die, is searching for that product market fit, and actually, maybe it doesn't ever happen, right? That's when you pivot. But in terms of process, it's very customer driven. So it's not that you're doing what the customer says, which is actually this slide. So customer development is not feature mongering. It's not asking what the customer wants and then going and building that, which is another trap that entrepreneurs fall into. You want to use, what's called the 5 whys, right? Which I think is an agile approach to solving engineering problems inside your company. When a customer says that they want something, you need to ask them why, and you need to keep asking why until you understand why it is that they're asking for it. What is the pain that they're actually solving? They don't necessarily know what's the best way to solve it. They're going to give you a bunch of ideas, but not until you understand what they're trying to solve can you maybe come up with the right solution. And so what you're doing during this phase where you're trying to reach product market fit is you're hopefully iterating quickly on your product. You're constantly talking to customers to try to hone in on what it is that they're trying to solve and what it is that they need. And you're measuring their passion for the product, right? So there's a couple of methods of measuring passion. Sean Ellis sort of invented the survey.io, where it asks the question, if this product went away, how disappointed would you be? And people throw out their numbers like 40%, 50%. If you can get that number of people that would say they would be very disappointed if your product was no longer available, then that's an indication of passion. And you're trying to grow that user passion, trying to grow the fervor of that passion, and you're trying to grow the number of people that actually have that passion. And that's really what drives you, I think, towards product market fit. If you're increasing the passion, the number of people that are passionate, it's a good market signal that you're onto something. And so you're constantly in conversations with your customers. And really, in this world of software, internet, and iPhone apps and all the rest, your IP, there is no IP anymore, right? It's so easy to copy this stuff. You're not going to be able to get patents and protect your internet idea, most likely. Even if you got the patents, your ability to litigate is very small. Your differentiation and your winning combination is your relationship with your customers. So if you're developing passion with your customers, that's what's going to keep them your customers, right? Your interaction with them and the passion that you create is your differentiator. And so establishing those relationships early on is what's going to hopefully tend you towards this product market fit.
Why don't we go to the slide with the folks so that they can follow and check out. So Steve Blank, he wrote the book called The 4 Steps to the Epiphany. That's his Twitter handle right there as well. If you're at all interested in what we've been talking about, he's sort of the progenitor of all this stuff. I recommend reading his book, The 4 Steps to the Epiphany, again immediately. It's had a dramatic effect on the way I view startups and startup life. One of his students is a guy named Eric Rees. He took Steve's idea of customer development and melded it with agile software development, and this is what he calls lean startup. He's got a great blog called Startup Lessons Learned. Sean Ellis is a guy that Brant mentioned, probably the premier sort of startup marketer. He's actually doing his own startup right now, but his blog is pure gold for startup marketing. Heaton Shaw is an entrepreneur up in the Silicon Valley, very data-driven guy, also part of the sort of the lean startup crew, as it were. His company is called Kissmetrics. And then Rich Collins runs a Google group, Lean Startup Circle Google group. If you just Google that, you'll find that if you're interested, again, the sort of things that Brant and I are talking about.
We'll make this deck available too, so you'll be able to get access to these. Dave McClure should probably be up there as well. 500 hats.
500 hats, 500 startups. Dave McClure should be on there as well.
And he's got some great, his pirate slide on his pirate metrics, if you're doing online marketing, is really important. He also writes about changes in the investment world that I think are right on.
Then I guess last thing, so to pitch Brant and myself, so we wrote a book called Entrepreneur's Guide to Customer Development. It's a cheat sheet to Steve's book. Steve's book's amazing, you should go out and buy it, but it's very thick, very dense, and really makes you earn the knowledge in it. We did sort of a Cliff Notes version of it. You can get it as a PDF at custdev.com. You can get it as a paperback on Amazon or Kindle. And if you use the discount code there, you can get 20% off if you buy it as a PDF.
And then our contact info here, we like to discuss the book or anything else that you'd like to discuss. So
thank you for having us. And if you guys have any questions about anything we talked about, throw them at us.
I have a question. You mainly mentioned that customer is the major person you should consider when you are developing products. But customer is only part of the stakeholder. I mean, vendor is a stakeholder. The innovator is a stakeholder. I'll give you an example. You know, when 3M invented the Post-it note, if they would have asked anyone, you know, do you need a Post-it note, sticky note? No one would have a clue, you know, I don't need it. Fax machine, I didn't need it, but I can't live without it, you see. Same thing with the Post-it notes. So I think we should also look at other stakeholders, you know, and not only the end user as the stakeholder.
No, right. It's a good point. So it all depends on your business model. We actually have a section in the book where we do what I call the customer development whiteboard, and it's as if you were, you know, in a room with your management team or with your other people, and you draw your ecosystem. What is your ecosystem? How do we envision this product getting to market? What is the value prop for each one of those stakeholders? Which ones are mission critical, right? And so which ones should you focus on first? And what are your assumptions around there? And it lines up the things that you should do customer development to test. So yeah, it all depends. We tend to talk, you know, a little bit generically about you know, customer and product, but there's all sorts of, you know, other alternative business models out there that make those ecosystems very complex. So you bring one up. There's end-tiered, you know, marketplaces where you've got, you know, it only works when all the entities are at the website. There's, you know, network effect businesses. So yeah, I think that there's a way to use these methodologies for any of those business models, but you have to be creative and you have to figure out who it is that you need to talk to in order to validate part of your business model. So what are the riskiest elements of your business model?
Back to your 3M Post-it example, it's a great example. I'm glad you brought it up. So what Brent and I are saying aren't that, hey, do you want, you know, tell me what you want, and then it'll come out fully formed from the customer's mouth. And they'll be like, oh, I want a little square thing. I want it to be kind of bright yellow, and I want a sticky side, and I want to be able to tear them off and put them everywhere, right? Often that's not, like, people don't think that way, right? But as an entrepreneur, you have the vision, right? I'm guessing though, like the 3M story, I know there's been, like, it's not in the news how they came about. I'm guessing though, what they probably did is they observed, or the guy who came, you know, he probably observed how people were taking notes, right? So no one actually verbalized to him, this is what I want, and I want it to be this cool, and I'm gonna throw it up on my whiteboard, right? But he probably observed, you know, or Staples, for example. They say that Staples, the guys actually went out and looked at how much office supplies people were purchasing at companies. And it asked, like, for example, like an admin or a secretary, say, oh, how much do you spend on supplies? And they go, oh, I don't know, $100 a month. Then they actually went out and went into the storeroom and actually started, like, looking at it. They were like, wait a second, this is actually $2,000 worth of supplies, right? And they saw this mismatch on terms of what customers are saying, potential customers are saying, and customers are actually doing, right? Massive difference often. And so you can still apply the same principles to that. But again, I just want to be clear. No one who understands customer development thinks that they're gonna, you know, the customer's gonna spit out exactly what they want to you. They can talk about their problems and their pains and their passions, and as the entrepreneur is sort of beholden to suss that out and create a solution. Any other questions?
Yeah, investors almost always want IP, but then you just mentioned that it's almost impossible to really have or hold on to it. Yeah. So how does that?
It's a good question. I think Brant was talking, you know, more about sort of you know, the B2C play in internet. If you're doing medical devices, I think it's a radically different world. Sure. And there's a lot of medical devices here in Orange County and San Diego. I think there you can probably do some heavy IP and, you know, get all the patent attorneys involved and spend a ton of money and protect yourself and et cetera, et cetera. So
Well, I guess if you can't get it, or it's difficult, or can easily be gotten around, what do you tell the investors?
Well, I try to concentrate on differentiation. I mean, I think that the investors, you know, are a little bit old school in Southern California, and so they ask for IP, and your mentors ask for IP, and all these people are asking for IP, and so I like to stir things up by saying in front of them, IP's old story, it doesn't work anymore. I mean, I'll turn it around and say, okay, well, say I've got this IP for a software product or an internet product, and a competitor comes along and copies me. How am I going to? What does that IP do for me? What's the next step?
Hire a lawyer.
Litigation.
Right. You're going to hire a lawyer, and he's going to do what? You're going to go sue this company? I mean, it's not going to be solved in court. It isn't. And especially in the software and the internet world, you can see what somebody's doing and do it differently, very easily. There's just no protection there. The only people that the IP is protecting now are the big businesses that have the huge law firm or the legal wherewithal to be able to protect their patents. So if you're doing hardware, you've probably got you've got something to protect. But I'm going to say if you're doing software, not likely. If you're inventing new algorithms in or AI or really technical software, then yeah, maybe you've got something to protect there. But like even in the data warehousing world, there's these software plays where people are using all of this sophisticated math in order to write data and extract data, a lot faster. And so then now there's just these competing algorithms, right? So they're all protected. And, I mean, are they going to fight each other? It just, these days you can't really solve that stuff in court.
I run into the same situation what he's pointing out.
I know, I do too.
You're right, it's not illegal, I totally agree. In fact, I was myself involved, and it costs you so much money, you don't win the battle anyway.
Right.
But here is the problem though, you're presenting to investors with the money, and we say, well, there's no IP protection, sometimes people can tweak a little bit and copy, or even if you have IP, you can't sue them, or would you sue them? You know what, it kind of pours the cold water on this investors.
Go to a different investor.
They say, you know what, I don't know that I want to put a couple of million into this.
Go to a different investor. Go to the Bay Area. Go to some place where they actually understand that. I mean, the thing is that the investor, reasonably is trying to mitigate their risk, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That's the word.
Well, so if you can have a rational discussion with them that says that me spending $10,000, $20,000 or whatever it is on IP does not mitigate any of their risk, then I mean that's sort of the rational discussion to have, right? But if they don't get that, if they want you to go and get IP even though you know that it's not going to protect you, then I'm not sure that's the right investor for you.
I think it's the quality, exactly what Brant said. It's the quality of the quality of the investor, and what they bring to the table, and as well as the context. Again, so biotech, medical devices, radically different world, and I have no experience in it, but radically different world than what kind of Brant and I are experienced with and talking about, right? So. In terms of, actually I pitched a VC once for an idea, and it was like clearly no IP. It wasn't very sophisticated. The first thing, and it's kind of a safe harbor. It sounds smart. Like, oh, what's your IP strategy? Kind of crinkle their eyes. Like, really? Like that's what you got for me? Like, bye. It's this is actually what I like a lot about customer development is if you do the customer development process, you learn about your customers, your clients. You know how they like purchasing. You know why they're purchasing. You can go toe to toe with the VC. About your company and feel pretty confident about it. Because it's no longer just a bunch of guesses or Excel spreadsheet, right? You can go like, yeah, I've sold 10 of these to these guys. I know why they bought it. And often, the investor will go, oh, you should do this and this and this because they saw it in the news somewhere, right?
The other thing to do real quickly is flip it onto intellectual capital rather than intellectual property. So why is it that your domain expertise or why is it that your intimate knowledge of the customer is what's going to protect you rather than the lawyers. So think intellectual capital rather than intellectual property.
No easy answers, unfortunately. Any other questions? Anything else?
Let's thank our speakers, everyone.
You bet.
Right.
Very good.
just want to shout out that the next program will be 1 month from today, March 3rd, Thursday, March 3rd. We'll be doing the elevator pitch, and Chris Van Dusen will be our guest speaker. High efficiency. You'll check out his company. All of you are on our mail list, so you'll be getting information in a couple weeks. Thank you.
Thank you.